And we're live.
Great.
Hey, my name is Rafi Gassel. Welcome to the show. This is the Eretz Ard Jerusalem Union talk show about peace and reconciliation in Israel-Palestine. I'm here with my good friend Maad Abu-Ghazalah. Maad originally hails from Nablus, but now lives in the United States. And why don't you introduce yourself? Because you know you better than I know you.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm in Arabic, it's Maad Abu-Ghazalah, father of the gazelle. I was born in Nablus, but I spent most of my life in San Francisco, and I'm currently living in North Carolina. I've been pretty politically active my whole life. I was president of the Middle Eastern Law Students Association in Santa Clara. I actually ran for Congress after 9/11, just because I felt it was wrong for Arabs and Muslims to lay low, because that's what was being told to us at the time was, the Muslims did this, so, now, you got to lay low so we don't get any backlash, and I wanted to do something which was the opposite. I have faith in the American people that there is space for conversation and disagreement. So that's why I guess I want to do this conversation with Rafi today. Is I believe when people fear conversations, difficult conversations, that's when things go sideways. So just as this is a very long-winded introduction, but I just want to say that it was just as I felt after 9/11, that was specifically the time when we needed to have conversations, so we don't end up invading Iraq and doing all these things that have been counterproductive. I think this is one of those times when you need to have the most difficult conversations, the hardest ones, to avoid similar catastrophe. So that's my background.
Okay, thank you, Maad. Maad.
Maad.
It's with an iron.
You have ayin in Hebrew, right?
Yeah. I also speak شوية Arabic.
All right, good.
Yeah. So my name is Rafi Gassel. I live in it sounds similar to Maad Abu-Ghazalah. I live in Jerusalem, Israel. I'm originally from the United States, from Chicago, Illinois. I lived in the US during 9/11. I was also in Israel during the outbreak of the first Intifada. And so this situation now sort of reminds me of those times when you have a sort of a major catastrophe going on and people then react hostile and wars break out. Politically speaking, you asked me where I'm standing. So at one point I was a little more right wing. You had also mentioned you had been a little more right wing. I was a member of the Bayit HaYehudi Central Committee at one point. And then I've also been an activist for federal solutions for Israel-Palestine. Today, I'm now in a party that's I guess far on the left in Israel. That's called Kol Ezracheha, like a party for all its citizens. The party supporting equal rights for Jews and Arabs and Palestinian citizens of Israel in Israel, and also supports some kind of reasonable solution for the greater Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And so that's where I hold. My vision is I'd like to see sort of a two-state solution with open borders where instead of a wall, we could have a sign. One side says, welcome to Israel, and the other side says, welcome to Palestine. And Palestinians should be welcome in Israel, and Israelis should be welcome in Palestine, and find a way to right the wrongs of the past and make a better future going forward. That's what I'd like to see. Right now we're in a tough situation. I think we pushed off resolving, and Israel is largely at fault at this, but and also obviously the Palestinians as well, for sort of kicking the can down the road, hoping things would just, they could just manage this long-term occupation and in the West Bank and create something like an apartheid situation in the West Bank, and leaving Gaza as sort of a tiny enclave that is under blockade, and that was a pretty bad situation. And sending money to Hamas, which was an organization that was sort of bent on eventually going to war with Israel, as we saw, and hoping that Israel could just keep making money and keep, living the good life and pretending our problems aren't really there. And it kind of blew up in our face. And I'm hoping that this will somehow lead to, like in I say like what happened in Bosnia, the Bosnian War, when you had or the troubles in Northern Ireland. Eventually, like the stuff hit the fan, and you had a big conflict, and eventually it led to some kind of peace agreement. And I think that's where it's going. I'm just not sure exactly how we're going to get there.
Well, yeah, there's horrible ways it could get there. It may not get there. In the sense that was just to give people context. The way we've met each other was through a forum, which was to discuss a federation, which I think both of us, Rafi and I, firmly believe is a good solution, a long-term solution. And we were headed down that path, and I thought we were making really good progress. Then the October 7th happened, and it really sidetracked things in the sense of priorities. For me, I just want to see the immense suffering stop at the moment. We can discuss what happens afterwards more at our leisure, or more of a leisure. Rafi, I guess you might say, well, that's how you get to stop the killing, is you present a peace solution that people can agree with. But I don't think I don't visualize that. I don't see that this is going to end because somebody presents a peace proposal to Netanyahu who says, oh, this is great. We'll just give half of Palestine, or Israel, half of Israel to the Palestinians, when he's, in his mind, he's king. He's king of Eretz Israel. And so that's why I don't want to distract myself discussing, to me, what is a red herring. In the sense that if we're sitting here discussing a long-term solution, which I want to do when we have the luxury to do it, it's going to give more time and less energy of mine spent to stopping the killing tomorrow. Tomorrow, 200 Palestinian civilians are going to die. They've died 200 have died every day. If I could just save 1 day's worth of deaths, that's a lot of people. A lot of people. So yeah. I want to see, what is it going to take to stop the killing tomorrow in an hour, if we can. And then we can go back to our conversation about, okay, how do we solve this in the long run? And just one more thing, and then we'll get to our conversation, is to give more of a background. As you said, I was right wing before. I wasn't exactly right wing. I was libertarian, which fundamentally, I think I'm socialist. I absolutely believe that society needs to provide a safety net for the weakest people in it, and that all people should be equal. But I don't know if that's right or left thing. I think both sides should believe that. But in terms of safety net, I think right-wing people tend not to feel that that's that important, and I think it's critical. The reason I was a libertarian was the only two governments I knew growing up was I was born in Nablus under, well, I don't remember, it was 1962. I don't remember living in Transjordan. I do remember first entering Nablus after the Israeli occupation in 67. I do remember that. It was like 68. My family would go and visit. We were living in Saudi Arabia at the time. And I just remember how horrible I thought the very concept of these, to me, what looked like fascist military. I mean, if you were Palestinian, the Israeli government to you was fascism. It was soldiers. There were no civilians. Like you see now after Oslo. I mean, all I remember in Nablus, the only Israelis I saw were soldiers. And in Saudi Arabia, you have a theocracy that also didn't allow freedom. So my libertarianism came from not from feeling that everybody should just make it on their own as individuals, but from a sense that it's not the government that's going to solve your problems. They're going to create more problems. So that's my right-wingedness comes from that perspective. It's not from a lack of a concern for humanitarian rights. Okay, so let's delve into this. So we had this, I thought, a difficult conversation in the sense that it was hard to get an answer. When this all first started, I had a few Israelis that I had conversations with, and I asked them how many, and I don't know how you're going to respond to this. We did have this conversation. I asked, you want to continue this war? Like right now, you don't want a ceasefire. Is that correct? I mean, just today, should Israel just stop the war?
I don't think they should stop if the other side doesn't want to stop. But I think if my
Okay.
hope is that both sides could find a way to agree to end the violence permanently, like that. My hope is that this war will be the last war, and however whatever's the best way to get there, I'm for.
Okay,
So
but let's just take it step by step. So
okay.
as of today, you're in charge of the military. Hamas
Mhm.
isn't surrendering, so you're still bombing.
I'm not sure I would do the same strategy. I don't know if I would be bombing as much as I could. I would try to avoid hurting civilians and going after the leadership of Hamas. I would say, and I would be at the same. I mean, military is sort of the other arm of diplomacy. I would be offering real peace. I mean, that's what my side is also missing. The there's no carrot. We have to be committed to actually wanting a real peaceful solution. I think they should be saying this instead of saying there will never be a Palestinian state. They should be saying we want to have a solution with the Palestinians. That is our goal. As soon as you'll agree to stop being at war with me, and we can end this violence. So I would be okay with a negotiation where we would get our hostages returned. I'd be willing to release prisoners if we could have some kind of truth and reconciliation process where you're talking about releasing people that killed innocent civilians. If that's the case, like they did in Rwanda, it can be done. You can have a process like if an entire society goes to war with another society for like years on end, and at one point everyone's killed somebody, or God forbid if that was the case, you need to have some kind of process. You can't just throw the entire society in jail, right? You have to have some way to move past it. So yeah, you need some kind of process where people would make amends and do some community service, meet the other people. I would be happy to enter some kind of truth and reconciliation process with the Palestinians, and to permanently end the conflict. And I would be offering to do that. And
Okay,
I think if we were doing that, we would sound like the good guys.
okay. But back to where we are today, we've got
Mhm.
the government, we got Hamas, who Hamas is, and the Israeli government in power, who they are. Uh, so as of my understanding is right now, something like 80-90% of Israelis believe or more believe that the amount of force being used is barely sufficient, if not shouldn't be more. Does that seem correct to you?
I'm not sure. Not amongst people I would know. I don't I know most Israelis would probably want to defeat Hamas and receive and get back our civilians. And whatever the best way to do that is, they would do that. If making a pause in the fighting for 2 months and then getting our civilians back and trading for prisoners will do that with the least amount of destruction, I think most people would be in favor of that.
Right, but here's the what I was getting at. This 5 minute um, introduction to this one question, preface to this one question, and the question
Mhm.
was, you said probably is that you think this war should continue. Many Israelis, almost all Israelis, believe that this war should continue until Hamas is destroyed. Does that does that resonate? Maybe you not
Yes,
personally.
that is the position of the most. I mean,
Yes.
I may be a little more, as a peace activist, a little more
Sure.
nuanced on it, but yeah, the average Israeli would say, yeah, they need to be removed from power. I mean, the idea that you can't kill everyone who ever voted for Hamas, that's not realistic. But you're talking about like the top leadership of Hamas will either be flee to Iran or be in prison in Israel or be killed in the fighting. Like one of those
Okay.
options.
But
Be out
here's
of
the
out of power.
okay. But here's the problem. Hamas is not going to surrender. So then the question is, okay, how many Palestinians are you willing to bomb, to kill, before it's enough. You say, okay, I can't end Hamas. I can't drive them out. And just so you know, I asked two people that were Israelis, and both said, all of them, that they would be willing to kill every Palestinian if that's what was required, every Palestinian in Gaza. I didn't ask about every Palestinian. I asked about Gaza. They said they would kill all 2.3 million Gazawis. They call themselves Gazawis, by the way.
Ghazawi, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know why we call them Gazans. They're Gazawis.
Akid.
Yeah,
But they don't.
so
People don't speak Arabic. You know, they don't have
well,
that.
I'm part of that movement because I think like the Houthis sound a lot cooler than the Houtins. If we said the Houtins, I think they would have worse PR, but because their Houthis sounds kind of cool, I think they have more support. But anyway, so the Gazawis, like people were saying, and there was this woman, I think I referenced her, and I think you looked it up in the state house in Florida. A woman who raised this question in the state house. You know, she rhetorically said, "How many Palestinians have to die before you stop this war?" And this woman another woman in the House of Florida said, "All of them." And there's many Israelis, I believe, that would kill all of them if that's what it took. Do you think
Yeah.
that's true?
I don't think so. I don't think, because I think it's somewhat of a trick question. Yeah, because first, I don't think we're going to bomb all of the people in Gaza. I mean, I have friends who lost relatives recently in Gaza, more than one. So I know people who have friends and family who've died in Gaza. It's pretty hard, and I know people who are who have died on the Israeli side. So I know people on both sides who have died in not such a long period of time. No, I don't think Israel should be willy-nilly bombing things, but I don't necessarily think that's necessary. Israel, I think, has stopped the massive level of bombing they did earlier on in the campaign, and now it's more, searching house for house for the Hamas leadership, searching tunnels, looking for civilians, and trying to put pressure on them in this negotiation process. So
that's your feed, your Facebook feed or
yeah.
whatever. My feed is just full of atrocities every day, massive atrocities. The hospitals being bombed with no proof that there's a headquarters underneath them. The latest thing I heard was bombing tent cities in Rafah. It's just one atrocity after the other, and then you see the Israeli TikTok where they're celebrating before destroying entire neighborhoods. So I don't see it as being slower. And where's the aid? Where's the aid? And instead of giving more aid, we're now giving less aid. The U.S. is now saying we don't want UNRWA to exist at all to provide aid. So I don't see the same thing that you're saying. I don't see I don't see Israel taking its foot off the gas. I see the intent being ethnic cleansing, driving them into the Sinai, because no other country would take them. Otherwise, they would just ship them off to whatever country would take them. The Gazawis are willing to die rather than move. They've made that statement. So, I mean, I don't know how you see this ending. If the Hamas is not going to quit, they're not going to surrender. The Palestinians, the Gazawis aren't going to leave to another country. So how do you? What do
really
you see?
honestly, I think that the leadership of Hamas will be destroyed probably within the next few months, and I don't think that there will be significant number of the Palestinians will end up having died. I mean, every life is a world, so like a lot of people will die, and it's horrible.
Do you believe they're starving to death now?
I know people that tell me they're hungry and are asking for money. Yes, there's it's pretty bad. I know that Hamas is stealing the aid that's coming in, and Israel's trying to figure out how to bring in aid and actually get it to the civilians and not get it to the Hamas military. It's complicated. It's not an easy situation. I don't know. I would hope that we could find a way to end the conflict, and where I see both sides are really trying to negotiate. The international community is putting out stuff every day, trying to come up with plans. There was, the European Union came out and said they should release all the.
Rafi, why?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm missing something.
Hmm.
What is driving the death rate? Is, you have to admit, at least 4-1 civilians to fighters, Hamas fighters.
Okay, so that's not the numbers they're giving us, but okay.
Well, give me a number. I mean, whatever number you want.
From what I've understood, that Israel claims to have killed about 10,000 Hamas fighters, and then there's about, so maybe 1.5 times the number of Hamas members that have been killed are civilians, which is still obviously too many, but
right. So
it's not. And I don't see the numbers climbing. It was 25,000 like a few weeks ago. It hasn't. They're not the level of people bombing, because they've stopped bombing so much. I can tell because I used to hear planes every 5 minutes over my head. Now I don't hear them. They're like once in a while, once every couple of days you hear a plane. It used to be every 5-10 minutes there were planes flying. You could hear it because I'm only an hour away by car from Gaza, maybe an hour and 15 minutes, but like in an airplane, I'm like 5 minutes, in a fighter jet. Right. So I would hear them flying over all the time. So I from my understanding is they switched, they realized that was a stupid strategy. Maybe they feel like they got that part done with. I don't know. But it reminds me a lot of what they did in Iraq. When George Bush first attacked Iraq, he did this shock and awe plan where they bombed the heck out of Baghdad and killed a whole bunch of people. And after that, they realized, what did we really accomplish? And they actually just sent people in, like looking for, Saddam Hussein hiding in a bunker, which is which is my understanding, at least from what I'm hearing, is that's the stage that they're at. They're sort of looking for Sinwar in a bunker right now, trying to hunt him down. Meanwhile, there's negotiations going on to get they assume he's hiding with all the hostages.
Well, he is there, right? Because that one hostage said, I think she said she met him.
Yeah. And he speaks Hebrew. I've seen videos of him.
Yeah. So here's what I think. What we're maybe I'm mistaken, but I think our perspective is colored by our feed. Do you think that's true? Yeah. So I'm seeing just atrocity after atrocity. So it's hard for me to see what you're seeing, which is that Israel has this agenda. They're trying to wipe out Hamas. They succeeded, and now they're taking their foot off the gas. What I see is just bloodthirst, mass murder, psychopathic, right?
So that's definitely a product of the feed. But I also make an effort to
both exist. The point is they both exist. You're not saying that those don't exist, right?
Well, first of all, there are crazy people on my side. Like, for sure. As much as there's Hamas on your side, we have our version of Hamas, and they're not called terrorists. They're but there are crazy people on my side. It's that believe that we should kick all the Palestinians out, or we should kill them all. There are the people, that's how we ended up in the ICC. People made statements that are insane. That
So given that there is atrocities daily or weekly, like mass murder is happening at least on a weekly basis, hundreds of people dying, drones just shooting people, which is to me particularly offensive. Why that you must feel that Hamas is such a monster that there's no way to just say, let's stop the killing and while we solve this problem, because as every day that goes by, we're having hundreds of people dying. What is the problem with the ceasefire now? Why is that so abhorrent to so many people there?
There are literally negotiations for a ceasefire now.
Is there a way to pause this? I need to charge my computer. Or you can can you edit it later? Just this 1 second. Or you can talk while I plug it in.
Sure. I can figure it out, but it's confusing.
Okay, let me go get my
Maad is going. Thank you for coming to my show, everybody. It's a pleasure to have you all here. Pretty soon I will, give my response to Maad's question. I'm hopeful that we will find a solution here for our conflict in Israel, Palestine, and we can move on to better days.
Okay, I am
And
back.
he's back.
All right.
Excellent, excellent.
Were you talking bad about me? Talking
No,
trash?
no, I was saying that I hope that we can move to better days in Israel Palestine. So I'll try to respond to your
Yeah, where
question
did
or
we leave
your.
off? Yeah, you were speaking and I cut you off. I apologize. Go ahead.
Okay, so what I would like to see, or what I think there is a movement towards negotiations. Like literally the entire world is pushing Israel and Palestine to have some kind of peace deal. And literally the US, the UK, the European Union are pushing this idea that we want to
No,
lead to
wait,
a two-state solution.
right. The specific question was, why can't we have a ceasefire today? Tell me the
Okay,
negative part
why?
of it.
Because both sides are negotiating for a ceasefire, and essentially, Hamas wants a permanent ceasefire. Israel is still committed to destroying Hamas, which I think is there's a little bit of irony here. First of all, Israel created a problem for itself at the beginning when they declared their intent to destroy Hamas as a goal and made that public. If they What they should have said is just we want to fight them until we get our civilians back, and we'll see what happens without having to commit, because then they set the bar pretty high, and now it's hard to walk back from that. So they made a mistake, and
So how do
the
you solve
public
this
was.
problem? Yeah, so you said, how do you solve the problem that while you're trying to achieve an impossible goal,
Mhm,
an incredible amount of atrocities are happening. So
correct.
how is it worth it? How is it worth pursuing an unachievable goal while just absolutely destroying your image? Israel's image outside of Israel is trash. Um, in America, the support for a ceasefire is over 60 something percent. So every day,
Sure.
Israel's
I,
losing.
I would I would qualify that though. The European Union said that they should have an immediate ceasefire, that all the hostages should be released, and that Hamas should be dismantled. Those were the three things. Of course, if I would vote for that right now.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm talking
yeah,
about the
release.
people. I mean, I don't know where the numbers are with the people. I'm talking about not the U.S. government, which is lockstep with Israel and Netanyahu. I'm
Mhm.
talking about the American people. Don't
Yeah,
at all favorably at Israel after October 7th.
yeah, sure. I mean, but that's not going to, it will not be this way forever. But we're talking about why. So there's Israel made a mistake or made this decision, and there are consequences to it by declaring that their intent is to destroy Hamas,
No,
which is
I'm saying
similar.
no, that's not my point. I want to get your answer. It's the only reason I'm interrupting you. My
Mhm.
point isn't that it was just that it was an unachievable goal. My point is that in pursuit of an unachievable goal, Israel has killed a lot of
Yeah,
civilians, and destroyed. It's not just that it's destroyed its image; it's done what I think is really something very evil. I mean, they're starving people to death, and you can explain why, but according to the UN, um, there is no rationale for genocide. There is no
mhm.
reason to kill that you can rationalize killing so many people, so many civilians. You can't say, I mean, I'm just going to regurgitate what others have said before me, which is if somebody's taking somebody hostage, let's say you go to in the US, you go to a school and some gunman takes a classroom hostage. You can't just kill all the kids in the schoolroom and say, well, we
Mhm.
had to because we had to get the gunman. And your example is okay, well, there's one and a half hostages and one gunman. My numbers are more like two or three hostages to one gunman, but nonetheless, you can't just go in there and just kill everybody and say this is the way to approach it. So even if hypothetically Palestinians are using each other as human shields, and mind you, the only documented literal use of human shields, as you've probably seen these pictures, is Israelis have literally used Palestinians as human shields. They've marched into villages with
Mhm.
children blindfolded in front of them, so that if somebody shot, they would shoot the children.
Well,
Palestinians are
Hamas did the
figuratively.
same thing. Hamas did that on October 7th. They took kids from one house to go knock on the doors of their neighbors, and then murdered the neighbors' families.
Mhm.
So they
I
also
can't
did
deny.
these.
I can't confirm or deny it. But
Seen
for
videos.
Israel to say for Israel to claim, well, Hamas is using Palestinians as human shields while they put kids on jeeps as they march through towns, and there's pictures of this. You just have to Google it, you'll
Yeah.
see it. That's kind of hypocritical. But anyway,
Hmm.
my point wasn't just that it's an unachievable goal, but
But
it looks like when you're going after an unachievable goal, that nobody thinks you're going to get it, and you kill so many people, to me, it really looks intentional. It really looks like Israel is an evil machine that is looking out for revenge. That's the point I wanted you to address, is they can't achieve this
yeah,
goal, yet they're killing so many people nonetheless every day. Why are you doing it?
well, they're why are they fighting the war? So they're fighting the war to defeat Hamas because they're
No,
angry about what happened.
why are you disregarding, why are you rationalizing killing tens of thousands of civilians?
Because I mean that's what happens in war. I look at from the Israeli perspective. This is similar to Israel fighting the Japanese in World War II after Pearl Harbor, and how many Japanese
I never
civilians
liked
got.
that. I think people think it's abhorrent that we dropped bombs on Hiroshima and
I
Nagasaki.
I,
I think
I
that's
agree. That
okay.
is what
So why are
happens
we
when you
going
fight
back there?
wars.
Why are we
So
going
when
back to killing civilians?
and because when you're fighting a war, the people just don't see that. The Israelis just don't see it, just like Americans didn't care about Iraqis when they were fighting the war in Iraq. They were more concerned about us losing American troops in Iraq than they were about how many Iraqi civilians were being killed. That's how a society works. They care
Mhm.
about their own people and not so much about the people that they define as their enemy. They rationalize violence because of their anger and their fear. So, from Israelis' perspective, they're afraid of Hamas. Hamas
Mhm.
is basically declared intent
Once-
to permanently fight a war with Israel unending, that they have sort of a religious conviction that it's their God-given right, sort of like the Japanese, the Emperor Hirohito said, go to
mhm.
war and conquer the whole Pacific, and for them, they believe Allah told them to go to war and take back the Holy Land of
Right.
Palestine, that is your God-given birthright,
Right.
and
So
they figure they'll never be able to we'll never see peace as long as Hamas exists. That's the Israeli perspective,
okay.
that
So
they'll never be rationalized with.
when Hamas blew up buses of civilians, it was horrific. I mean, that's no other way to describe it to me. I mean,
Yeah.
regardless of what I think of Hamas, what they did on October 7th, if you go back to the origins of saying, was it okay to go on a bus full of just random civilians and blow it up? To me, that was horrific. But the numbers are just so staggering. I mean, how many people did Hamas kill? They killed 800 civilians, 850 civilians on
Something like
October.
that.
Yeah. Um, and then you're looking at 20 plus thousand civilians on the
Yeah.
Palestinian
Or
side. I know you're going to say 15,
maybe
but
50. It doesn't matter. It's thousands of
thousands and
people.
thousands.
It's an order of magnitude higher. It
It's
is.
psychopathic. From my feed, it really
I hear
seems
that.
like you're going after a goal that's not achievable. You're just killing people. I mean, and a lot of so many lies. And of course, you're going to say, well, Hamas lies too. But it's just like, the killing of the journalists more than any journalist in any other war, and it's intentional because there's drones that killed journalists. Drones that had a specific program to go and kill journalists.
I don't
Um,
know about that.
well,
I,
there were drones that killed the journalists. You were aware of that?
with a missile or something.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, a drone killed a journalist and his. I don't know if I can post the link in the comments.
Okay.
But yeah, it was very targeted. So I don't think it's just random. I mean, the percentages of journalists, the number of surgeons that were killed, just so many people that were
I don't
killed.
know to what extent. I mean, our guys literally shot our own hostages that were running away. So I don't know how much
Yeah.
is intentional and how much is fog of war, how much is irresponsibility. I mean, we bombed a building. They demolished a building with 20 soldiers inside, and because somebody shot an RPG at a tank and somebody freaked out and pushed the trigger. So people
Mhm.
are under a lot of stress in this war here. It's not easy. People are on the
No,
Israeli
there's
side.
no, Rafi. It's not stress. I mean, you've seen these TikToks where soldiers are rummaging through, the drawers of people. There's reports, which we'll see if they're true, that the soldiers came into big homes with lots of men and women. They separated the men and women. They shot all the men. I think that might have been submitted to the ICJ. So this is the context that I see. This is why I think Israelis are psychopaths.
So I
I'm
mean
just
that's
blurting
why
it
there's a
out.
case, and they could take them to the ICJ and see where they, if they committed war crimes, then the people who did that should
Okay, it
should
just
suffer.
I need you to fight back on this point because from
What
what I'm seeing,
I don't know the exact details of what individual events that went on in Gaza. I'm not there, but what I
Hmm,
do know is from the perspective of Israelis in general. I think Israelis would be willing to end the conflict permanently if Hamas would agree to some kind of permanent peace and basically not be Hamas. And it's not clear, like, which, supposedly Hania wants to negotiate a permanent ceasefire, and Sinwar wants to negotiate a temporary ceasefire because he still wants to fight. I don't know exactly to what level this is, what's going on or what's true. But what I know from our perspective, if Hamas came out and said, listen, we really want to end the conflict permanently,
yeah.
and we're, and to sound peaceful, maybe they would listen to it. And
But
I
they're
would
not
say
going
it's
to.
fair enough to say if Bibi was like that as well, maybe Hamas would listen. I don't, human beings
They're
are,
not going to surrender. Hamas is not going to surrender. What's just really what's coming across from what I see in the States and from my feed uh, is that the Israeli soldiers are drunk with power, that they have the
Mhm.
ability to just massively kill with no repercussions. And I put all the blame on the Israeli leadership, that they're saying there's nobody being prosecuted for any crimes that are being committed now. In fact, the people in the the ministers now are worse. They're the ones egging them on. So
Mhm.
the thing that I'm having a hard time getting my head around is how a whole country could be so brainwashed as to the superiority of their group that they are okay with all these atrocities happening, that they're okay with saying we're going to cut off food and water for these reasons because we think Hamas is such monsters that we don't want to kill all the Palestinians, but if we
Okay,
have to.
yes. So we don't. That's not the narrative that we're telling. I mean, if you're, this is our accusations from the Israeli perspective. We're not cutting off food and water. There, maybe for the first few days, there was somebody who that was the policy, but it's obviously that's not continuing. There is food and there is water going to the Palestinians in Gaza. Most Israelis would say that they support aid to the Palestinians, that they believe that
They were
Hamas is stealing
protesting.
their aid.
They were protesting aid trucks from getting in. They prevented aid from getting in at the border.
This was the parents of the hostages or something.
Yeah.
Right, right, right.
Mhm.
Okay, this is not everyone in the country was doing that, but there was a group of people. There's a lot of different people in a lot of places. So this isn't that's not the position of every Israeli, and ultimately, food trucks did get in. So I don't think most Israelis believe the narrative that Israel is trying to massacre all the
If they did,
civilians. And
it
most Israelis I know who hear people saying that, they'll be like, those crazy people should shut up on our
okay.
side.
So
Yeah.
now that's important because that's not coming across on my feed. If it were true that Netanyahu said we're going to cut off all food and water to Gaza, would most Israelis be okay with it?
No, and that was not Bibi. That was the minister, that was Gallant. That was the Minister of Defense,
Salam.
the Yoav Gallant, during the first day of this. This was at a time when everyone was so pissed off. People did say some bad things in the first few days, and they got hauled into the case on the ICJ. They had statements coming from various people people were furious after what happened. It wasn't, we had atrocities committed, and people, were like, let's fight back and let's do whatever it takes, they broke all the rules. We don't care about the rules. We'll throw the rule book out. Let's go get them. Eventually, people calmed down and said, okay, you can't violate the law of war. We're a law-abiding country. We still want to have support of the international community and stuff. And they calmed down and started saying more rational things. And even amongst the Israeli public, at least I don't know anybody who supports stuff like Ben Gvir saying, kill them all. They're like, those, buffoons should shut up. And, they're just making us look bad.
All right, I'm going to segue. What comes after Bibi? Is Gantz any different? Because he said some pretty horrible things too.
I prefer Gantz over Bibi significantly. Gantz believes in a two-state solution, which is like a long direction better. Obviously, I'd like somebody even better. I think Bibi needs to end. His policies have been very destructive over the last 15 years, and it's part of the reason we've arrived at October 7th, because he basically gave them no hope. There was no chance of resolving this conflict. I remember I talked to Saeb Erekat once before he passed away, when they were doing negotiations during when John Kerry was coming at sort of the end of the Obama term. And he said Bibi just refused to say the 1967 borders. He would never say he would just never agree to two states. There's just like wasting my time,
Mm-hmm.
And
he fought against it for sure. He absolutely didn't want it.
Yeah. So, and that's not in our best interest. The idea that you're going to, there's 7 million or 7.2 million Palestinians here, and we're going to hold them down so that we can protect ourselves. And that's how we're going to live by the sword forever. That's insane. That's not a future I want to pass on to my kids. That's not a reasonable policy. We need to have an amicable solution to end this conflict, and we need a leader that understands that and has that vision for how to get us out of this. And Bibi has to go for a bunch of reasons, but the number one reason is that.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't like Bibi because of his policies towards reforming the judicial reform and for all the various other corruption charges. And I don't care as much about that as not wanting to make peace with the Palestinians is much worse, because that's like, generations of destruction that are just going to continue. We're going to continue to live in a conflict.
The reason I asked that, and it may seem divergent to our conversation, was I'm trying to get my head around what is going through Israelis' minds, because from where I'm sitting, it's hard to understand. It's really hard for me to look at what I'm seeing and believe that an entire society is okay with this. Something that is just to me, it really does look like genocide. It looks like there's just so many atrocities happening. There's so many civilians dying, suffering, entire neighborhoods getting blown to shreds. And the rationale I'm given for it is that Jews have felt so traumatized and victimized through this historical collective memory that it's created this paranoia that the Palestinians are trying to kill them, so that they need to kill the Palestinians first before they kill them. And you have to admit that there's a lot of people that believe this, that a lot of people believe that every Palestinian child is a terrorist just waiting to happen. And the big question is how. I know that's true, and like you said, Hamas has views that don't respect rights, human rights either. It's just trying to get my head around is how an entire army could be okay with just so much destruction, so much death. Every day it's traumatic. And the reason I asked about Gantz was trying to understand the mindset of, is this just necessary in order for us to get to where we want to go, or is it all out, let's kill the Palestinians?
No, I mean, in the defense of Israelis, the Israelis don't think that this is they don't want to kill all the Palestinians. The vast majority of Israelis do not believe
There,
in
there,
ethnic
is there a
cleansing.
number?
I mean,
Yeah, is there a
I would
number?
say
Is
of
there a
all the
number?
people I know, I
Yeah.
really could count the ones on my hands who are that crazy, who would say we should kill all the Palestinians or even push them out of Gaza. I really that is I would say like less than 1% of the people I would interact with amongst Israelis. Most Israelis, I mean, you think that the plan is to depose Hamas and put somebody else, some other Palestinians who are not Hamas, in charge of Gaza, and this will be a path to something better. That's what they would like to see. How to define what that better is, they have no. Not everyone knows, but that's what they would like to see. They don't want to. They don't want to keep fighting, and
So
they've.
what number would make the majority of Israelis say enough? How many dead Palestinians would they say, okay, that's enough? We're willing to accept ceasefire now.
That's not how it works.
Well, it's happening. It's happening every day. The number's increasing. Hypothetically,
right, but that's not how. That's not how the agreement on ceasefire. There, when you're in a war, you're concerned about yourself. I don't see like the Russians aren't concerned about the Ukrainian civilians. The Ukrainians aren't so concerned about the Russian civilians.
So
It's not
theoretically,
how.
all of them. Theoretically, all of them could die.
Yeah, but that's not a realistic question. Like, I mean, you've said this before, but yeah, I don't think that Israelis think that all the Palestinians will die if we continue until Hamas is deposed. It's like saying, how many,
But
what if
when
you
will
had to
it
kill?
stop? When will it stop? So let's say the number gets to 30,000. Would people start wavering? 40,000 dead Palestinians?
I mean, I don't think it would get to that number, but I think when they would, if Hamas gave back the hostages, then people might consider, well, why are we still fighting? And
That's what you don't. No, I'm giving you the hardest question. I'm gonna give you an easy question.
yeah, I don't know. I just don't think it would. I just don't
But
think it
let's
would
talk
get to that number.
hypothetically, because I'm trying to understand the mindset. Hypothetically, 50,000 Palestinians dead, civilians, still go forward?
It
Hamas
depends
has
on
to
the
be,
level of threat. I don't think that. I mean, let's say it was Lebanon, right? Because maybe in Lebanon it could get to that kind of number. I don't think it would in Gaza. Hamas is just not powerful enough to make it. I mean, that's part of the situation. Usually, like if you have 3 to 1 times the troops of the enemy and you're the attacker, the benefit is to the attacker. Israel outnumbers Hamas, 20 to 1. So Israel eventually, you just do the math. Israel will eventually beat Hamas. But let's say it was Hezbollah, right? Or Syria or some other country. How much would you? So Israel wouldn't do it. Israel would eventually say that, well, we'll end the border here and then call it a day. It's just not worth the danger to us. I think it's that you don't usually calculate in terms of how much damage you're doing to the other side. You count it until like how much damage will I take to if we were.
As a human being, you should. As a human being,
I know.
I find it interesting that you don't see it in those terms. I see the government.
I personally do, but I don't think that most people that's their major concern. Their concern is for themselves and their side. That's how you're in a war.
Let's say we reach 50,000 dead Palestinians. Would you say let's cease-fire?
I'm on a ceasefire now. I would like to end the.
You don't want to ceasefire now. You said you don't want to ceasefire unless there's the hostages are released, etc.
Right. No, I definitely I agree. I do not want a ceasefire without releasing the hostages and what Hamas is saying that they want, an agreement that the conflict is really over.
Okay, 50,000
right.
dead. Are you going to
So and how to phrase that? I'm encouraging pushing them together to do that, to come to that agreement that permanently ends the conflict. Because you got to think about this. If we, what's going to lead to more dead? If Israel withdraws and pulls back the troops, and then Hamas regroups and starts build up a military, and then goes to fight us again, and then we have to, and then we're back where we started.
You're talking hypotheticals, which may lead to another 800 dead Israelis. And today we're having 800 dead Palestinians.
No, not 800 dead Israelis. It'll lead to a reinvasion of Gaza and doing the whole thing again. It'll lead to a whole nother war. Like it's an unending cycle. That's the problem with Hamas. But you treat
it as inevitable that every time Hamas kills somebody, you have to kill 10 of them. I mean, I don't know what the ratio is, but In the past, there's
Mhm.
been some kind of a ratio for every Israeli dead, like 10 times as many, or at least 2 or 3 times as many Palestinians have died. My only question is, if it hits 50,000, Hamas still has the hostages. No ceasefire?
And then what? And then we leave the hostages there, or they agree to give back the hostages and they agree to
They
a
have not.
deal.
No, Hamas is Hamas. You can't. They're not
Well,
doing
they're
anything.
never going to release their hostages. Then we'll have to defeat them.
Continue killing.
Correct.
Okay,
We'll have to.
that's it. I'm good. I've gotten to the point where I think I understand, but it makes. I would hope that I wouldn't do the same thing. I would hope that.
What if we kidnapped a bunch of Palestinians
Okay,
and we're
like there
trading
are
them?
now. There's a bunch of Palestinians in prison without charge. Kids in
I would
prison
be
for.
fine with anybody. Everyone should be either charged or given back.
Okay, go
I'm
ahead.
in
So it's
favor of
not
trading
hypothetical. It's real.
people.
Okay,
Right.
so it's
But these
real. So
people didn't
we
do
have.
anything. These people that
Okay,
didn't attack. These are innocent people they just kidnapped,
people
and
do
they're threatening
Facebook
them.
posts. People do Facebook posts, end up in Israeli prisons. So go ahead. So what's the rest of the hypothetical?
Okay, and we're saying that we're one day going to invade Gaza and expel everybody. That's our plan. And you
Okay.
are Hamas, and somehow Hamas is much more stronger than us, and they're just beating the crap
Okay.
out of us. And we
Right.
Israel, poor little Israel, are hiding in bunkers with Hamas, with Palestinians. And no, we're not giving them back. We're going to keep fighting you, and because we believe that this is greater Israel, and eventually we're going to have to push you all because you're all really
Rafi,
Egyptians invaders.
there's not the remotest part of my being that would be okay with starving the Israeli population. 0% of me would allow that.
I'm not in favor of starving the Israeli population, but I want to end the conflict. So we can do that by talking. The other way is that, I mean, I'm not doing it, but if I do nothing, the Israeli leadership has told the army to go and overthrow the Hamas leadership. And eventually they'll do that. I'm convinced that they will do. There's nowhere for them to run. There's nowhere for them to escape. Eventually they will overthrow
The
them.
question is, like, what cost? And to
I
you,
don't
a
know.
cost of
That's why I
10,000,
want to.
20,000
That's
civilians
I
is
want
acceptable.
I want the Palestinian leadership to understand the cost of this fight. That we could end this now by agreeing to what they're asking for is a commitment from us that we will end the conflict. And I'm saying what Israel wants is a commitment from them that they'll end the conflict. That
And
we
I'm
both want the
saying,
same thing. We,
no, I'm
you
saying,
know, and if
I'm
I'd
saying,
like to
I'm
see
saying,
them get to that.
I'm saying, I'm ignoring both of those and saying Hamas is not going to give up. The
But
question is,
they're literally asking for a negotiation right now.
when will Israel stop the killing if Hamas doesn't give up? And your answer is
When Hamas is destroyed, Hamas will
yeah,
be
which
destroyed.
if you literally mean that, hypothetically, it could be all dead Palestinians. Hypothetically.
But that's hypothetically inaccurate. It just
No, I
doesn't
think
make
that's what you
sense.
said. Otherwise, you give me a number. Give me a number at which point you'd say, okay, now we need a ceasefire, even though the hostages aren't released. It's either you give me it, because right now we know 25,000 total dead doesn't reach your threshold of wanting a ceasefire. And you're saying all 2.3 million dead is probably
That's too much.
Okay.
Yes, right.
So
So
you're
I
saying
don't
somewhere
know.
in between there. And for some Israelis, it is 2.3 million.
Yeah. So I don't think I don't really think it'll get there. So far, Israel has defeated the majority of Hamas fighters, and they don't need to kill everybody. They just need to
But you're okay with the
remove the
hypothetical.
leadership and cut this deal. Eventually, like
yeah, we don't have a disagreement. I wanted to understand your position and
yeah.
your position so I can sleep on it and let it
So
sink
my
in.
belief is that scenario is unlikely. My belief is that my understanding is that Saudi Arabia and the Palestinian Authority and Jordan have already met and sort of started with the Americans and Europeans coming up with a post-war plan to install the Palestinian Authority instead of Hamas. There's also negotiations for making some kind of government that would include Hamas if they could agree to play ball. I would be fine with either of those solutions. I would prefer they played ball and we end the fight right now. So my goal is for for everyone, the better angels in all sides, to say enough people have died. and let's stop more people from dying right now. They're literally in negotiations where both sides are asking for a commitment to end the fight, or Hamas is asking for this, and Israelis would probably agree if they believed that Hamas was sincerely ending the conflict permanently with Israel. They would probably go along with it. Most Israelis, because we don't want to be in war.
Cost, it's the cost, though. So for me, one dead, if starving the country of Israel, to me, just I don't see it. I'm not in that position where I can make that choice, but I could not see if there was, let's say, an Israeli terrorist that killed a Palestinian.
But it's not a terrorist. Let's say it's at the government. Let's say we were genocidal.
Israeli government.
I had a genocidal government that was committed to exterminating the Palestinians or expelling all of the ethnically cleansing all Palestinians. Yeah. And that's what they wanted. And we were going to arm. And we'll say, stop attacking us because you're killing too many Israelis, but we're holding our right to armed resistance to ethnically cleanse you. You have to deal with that.
Slow down.
I would say no. Hamas does not have the right to ethnically cleanse me. This is self-defense.
They don't have the ability either.
But I don't care. No, because they're not in a mental asylum. Hamas does have the ability to cause a lot of damage. And if
killed 850 people.
Sure, and they could continue. They could build an army up again and do more damage.
So to protect 850 people, you have people in Israel saying we need to kill every single Palestinian.
No, of course we don't need to kill every Palestinian. We need to kill the leaders of Hamas, maybe like a dozen people that are in charge of Hamas, or either they agree to peace, they surrender. We arrest them, they flee to Iran, I don't care, or they get wiped out in this fight.
That's a rationale that excuses the killing of tens of thousands of Palestinians, if not hundreds of thousands in some people's views. And that's the way
obviously I think if it was hundreds of thousands of people that would die in this, I would think we would not do that.
You would hit your threshold.
Yeah, I would hit my threshold.
The difference I see is that you're talking about the potential, you're talking about genocide. If the Israeli government had genocidal policies against the Palestinians in this reverse scenario.
Right.
But add to that they don't have the capacity to commit genocide. So if Hamas was in power and overwhelming power.
Well, Hamas might. See, that's the problem. Hamas could, in theory, take over the West Bank at some point. Get in charge of all of the,
these are
this is the concern from the Israeli side. If that Hamas is this entity that it's preventing also the possibility of ending the conflict permanently. As long as this is why we haven't had a conflict. This was the excuse of Bibi. This was supporting Hamas.
Yeah, I think the difference.
As long as Hamas exists, we will still have an occupation. We will not have peace.
This is what I think the difference in our feeds has created, is your view that Hamas is a bigger monster than I see Hamas, or the world sees Hamas. You see them as an existential threat, right?
Yeah.
No, because if I
depends which world. I think there's a lot of people on the governments of most European countries are more on Israel's side. I would say
the governments are right, but the people are not. But this is where I think the distinction is that if I believe that one nation was about to genocide my nation, then I would say, yes, we need to defend ourselves if that means killing everybody. But if I felt that these monsters or these terrorists were going to kill 1,000 of my people, that's not a justification for wiping out tens of thousands of the other side. I wouldn't ever take that step, which, I'm not in your shoes, but those are the things I have a hard time understanding, is how you see the Hamas as such an existential threat that I don't see it. And as an example of this, as you said, one of the solutions you'd like to see is that the Israelis provide the civilians an opportunity to leave Gaza, as long as there was some screening so that no Hamas members would also escape. Right? That was
or nobody had weapons. I don't get
right, but do you understand? Do you understand that these Hamas people that you're talking about are people's brothers and fathers and relatives. There's no
Absolutely.
chance. There's zero chance that scenario would ever happen, that people would leave their father to be destroyed, because once the civilians leave, you're just going to nuke. You're going to kill everybody. So the
That's not
concept
true.
that the civilians would just voluntarily abandon their family members to be slaughtered, which is just, why you would even think that's possible. It's strange to me that the Hamas is such monsters to you.
No, I think
If they
so. I
don't even
mean,
have
they would
families
want to
that
be
would,
martyred. This is the ideology, the glorification of
they they want
martyrdom
they want to
that
liberate
they.
their country. You don't see that aspect of Hamas. You only see the
I
aspect
I
that
I
they
know,
want
I
to die.
totally do, but they also have glorified, willing to death. And every side does that. I'm not going to just say that's just to Hamas. Maybe they do it to an extreme level of somewhat extreme because of their circumstances, religious ideology, for whatever reason. But I think that I I would like to see them. My concern is, if we don't do this, we're never going to see peace in Israel Palestine. This is what's going through my mind.
Mhm.
If we give in to Hamas, we're going to leave this sort of thorn in our side that it enables us never to resolve the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. How many more people are going to die over the next 50 years of this conflict than if we just finished Hamas off and signed a peace agreement in 6 months from now that ended the Palestinian? Is that worth it for you? And let's say 10,000 more people would die, but we would end the Palestinian-Israeli conflict that would have gone on another 50 years, where thousands of people would die all the time.
Okay,
Kids would throw
I'll throw
stones and
you a
get
bone.
shot. Right? This is
I'll
the challenge.
right. I'll throw you a bone. Um, if that 10,000 included 5,000 Israelis and 5,000 Palestinians, would you be okay with it?
Maybe.
All of a sudden, it's different. So if it's
Yeah.
10,000 Palestinians, you're okay with it. But if it's 5,000 Palestinians, 5,000 Israelis, it's maybe. I really appreciate the honesty, because that's a tough
Hmm.
one.
It is a tough one. I don't know.
I don't think many
Right?
people. I think
When
people
you
would
get
bite the
into
bullet.
these scenarios, you have to know how many lives am I saving in the long run? It's like, the train runs over one
No, but
person, you
you're
switch.
right. But no,
I
but
don't
you're
know.
admitting that no, but you're admitting that Palestinian lives are not as important to you as Israeli lives, right? I mean, just
I,
maybe that's all of us are that way. I'm not trying to point a
I don't
finger at you,
know.
but
Fair,
it
fair
seems that
enough.
way. Okay. All
It's
right.
fair. It's easier because it's people that I know more personally than I know people in Gaza.
I'm not judging
Yeah.
you at this moment. I'm just having
Right,
a
right.
conversation,
It's fair
and
enough.
and
That's
and
the
you're being
collective
very
memories that
honest.
I have.
Yeah.
Right.
So I appreciate it. I appreciate your saying that, because that's what it seemed like. Because you were saying you would be willing to sacrifice 10,000 people if it got us peace, but you really meant you're willing to sacrifice 10,000 Palestinians, civilians, which mean a lot to you, but not quite
Hmm.
as much as, let's say, 10,000 Israelis. You wouldn't be willing to sacrifice 10,000 Israelis for peace.
Maybe. I don't know. That's a good question.
All right, so
I think.
I'm good. I mean, you can. I don't know if there's an end to this conversation. I feel
Yeah.
you've helped me understand what I take you as being an intelligent, moral person, and I'm just trying to understand why you don't want to cease fire. And so
Yeah.
having this conversation is helping me get through the day to day of seeing, these atrocities happening and not calling for a ceasefire. Why is that happening? It's
Right.
tough. It's
There are
tough to
there
watch.
are Israelis calling for a ceasefire for various reasons. Some want a ceasefire where they negotiate to get the families of the
Mhm.
hostages that want that's their priority. Some people really sympathize with the Palestinians and say that Israel is killing too many Palestinians. They want that to end. There are certainly Israelis like that. There's a range of people. Some people want, they don't want the people who died in the so far to have died in vain. So they want to see Hamas really defeated. So they feel like we've achieved the goal to make their sacrifice worth it. I'm honestly telling you.
Yeah. Well, it's a tough conversation. and it's tough to do this live where you're thinking out loud,
Yeah.
bearing your views to ridicule or
Yeah.
judgment to others. So I appreciate you're doing it. I don't know how much we've accomplished for a viewer,
Yeah.
because people don't like to see confrontation. I know it's good headlines, but it's hard to watch confrontation. But I
Yeah.
think what I do appreciate is not beating around the bush and addressing. We could be talking about utopian solutions, and that's wonderful, but we're not
Hmm.
going to get there if we don't get past these really difficult questions and face them head on. What is the underlying problem in this conflict? Anyway, so I'm willing to. I mean, do you want to pursue any other questions or?
Sure. I mean,
I
do
mean,
you?
I'd love to do this again if there's more things we can discuss. I
Sure.
guess for me, this was a good discussion, just like I said, to understand why somebody wouldn't call for a ceasefire, and I feel that I have
Yeah.
gotten closer to that.
Okay, good. So do you feel now that you would be pushing pressure on Hamas to ceasefire? If I was a Hamas advocate, would you be
Mhm.
convincing me to stop, or would you?
What ceasefire? What are they doing? Tell me what ceasefire from Hamas looks like.
So they would say, okay, we're willing to give back the hostages. We will, we are looking to end this fight, and we're willing to enter into some kind of negotiated peace process with the Israelis, and we will be a part of that process. We will put aside violent resistance in favor of negotiated settlement for a permanent settlement. We will accept the idea that we will end the conflict permanently. That's the vision we would hold on to.
So first of all, the hostages are two ways. So Israel would have to release any any prisoner that's not charged, right? So I understand that they want to release all Palestinian prisoners. I don't think I would require that. But if there's Palestinians that haven't even been charged, which there's quite a few, and especially children, that has to be part of the release, the hostage release, right?
No problem. No,
Yeah, yeah,
I
I
think
would think so.
Israel would be willing to release a lot of hostages. I mean, I
Yeah,
would
in
I
addition to what I
personally
said.
would release I would if we were really serious about negotiating peace, like and ending the conflict, I'd consider an amnesty program for everybody
Right.
and figuring out how to play that out.
Yeah,
Obviously,
I'm putting that off down the road. We can discuss,
Okay,
at least for today, at least release the ones that haven't been charged. So, so,
sure.
so from today, Israel releases the ones that haven't been charged. Hamas should release the hostages that they've taken, the civilians that they've taken. Um, if they keep the soldiers, I don't know. I think that's when you negotiate the ones that have been
Sure, but
charged.
let's say I'm the Hamas guy, right?
All
So
right.
and would you try to convince me that I should make peace with the Israelis and accept the right for the Jews to be in the Holy Land with me
But
and accept them to
maybe
have a
you,
state?
yeah, maybe I'm misread it. I thought they made those overtures that they have accepted Israel's right to exist. Was I mistaken?
They have not exactly. They have come back and forth. They have said various things. They at one point, Hania said, "I'm willing to negotiate a two-state solution," and another point, I think Khalid Mashal said, "No, we reject the two-state solution." And another, Ghazi Hamad said we would repeat the October 7th 10 more times. They haven't consistently said we're ready to end the fighting for and recognize Israel and to live side by side and in a resolved conflict as a permanent solution. Like we will
Well, I
not
mean,
fight them anymore.
but you talk to three people, you'll get like 10 opinions about what this permanent solution is. The question is, if you ask, would I be willing to pressure Hamas to accept the existence of Israelis in whatever government we have, um, in security? But as in terms of Israeli government, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with an Israeli apartheid Israeli government. So right now when people talk about Israel, we're talking about the apartheid state of Israel, not a state in which people have equal rights. So what I would tell Hamas is, do you accept that an Israeli, a Jew in this area, whatever you want to call it, has rights to live there in security and freedom without fear of being attacked?
Sure. I mean, I would say as the Hamas leader, yes, as long as he submits
Okay.
to Islamic superiority, that this
No,
is an
no,
Islamic.
no. It has to be equal. I should add to that, with equal rights to everybody else. Would you accept, as a Hamas guy, would you accept that every Jew living in this territory has equal rights to everybody else? I would push for that.
Maybe. Would you convince the Hamas member to recognize Israel as a state? Like it has the right to exist, even if the
What
Israelis
does Israel
don't
mean?
agree.
What does Israel mean? Does it mean the
I'm telling
apartheid
you, like,
Israel?
let's say they would. I mean, obviously, I'd like to see some kind of federal state where we have an open
Okay.
border and everyone goes. But let's say we couldn't convince the Israelis to that. Let's say we
Okay.
were really the best we could do was convince there will be Palestine, there will be Israel, there will be you'll need a visa to go to the other side, and we'll divide Jerusalem in half. It'll be kind of a not the funnest solution for everybody, but that's the best we could do. Would you accept to live with that? Like
Yeah.
there
So
will be
this is
Israel.
where you can. So I made you admit to something that was slightly uncomfortable. That's less popular, I'd say. That's what I would say. That's not popular. Is no, I wouldn't push him for that. I don't believe in a state of Israel where it's a Jewish state, where Jews have superior rights, because not necessarily because they're written that Jews have superior rights, but because they're going to be in a majority in a government that's designed to have Palestinians as a minority. So there's going to be all sorts of discriminatory laws against them. And
But
this is
what
their.
if we didn't have discriminatory laws? They're just two
Mhm.
states, but there's the state
Okay.
of Israel is a Jewish majority state, and maybe they'll let some number of Palestinians move there, but not enough to overthrow the Jewish majority. And
Mhm.
it would be what it is, and they would have to live with that. It doesn't mean that there's no Palestinians. We have lots of Palestinians who are here, and there are
I'd
lots
need
of
a little
Palestinian
more.
citizens of Israel.
Yeah, I'd need a little more details about the rights of. The biggest question I'm going to have to that is the refugees. I mean, without this is I've talked to you about this before, but if there was an Israel that allowed, and again, this is a hypothetical that is not practical, but if there was an
Mhm.
Israel that said, yes, any Palestinian that was kicked out or their ancestors, immediate ancestors were kicked out, has the right to return. Yeah, I could see that happening. I could say, okay, this is Israel, even with all these refugees. Let's say the refugees decided they didn't want to return. That's one of the
Mhm.
possibilities. But they said, if you're a Palestinian refugees, you do have a right to return if you
Yeah.
choose to accept it. I'd be okay with that. I would be
But
okay.
I
I would,
think that's
like that.
unlikely that they would say an unlimited
Of
number
course.
of
No,
Palestinian
that's why
refugees.
you need a whole conversation. But yours
Right.
about the hypothetical. Would I accept an Israel? I would say under these conditions, which is, Palestinians that were kicked out have their rights, however that may be addressed. Then I would say, yeah,
Mhm.
Hamas, let's create this deal where we end this conflict once and for all, and Israelis feel secure in their that they're not going to be attacked, but at the same time, we haven't thrown the refugees under the bus.
Right. Okay, I mean, realistically, I don't know if let's say you did a two-state with a hard border that Israel would agree to unlimited
Okay.
even if we ended up federation that they would agree to an unlimited number of refugees moving to Israel. I don't
Okay.
know if that's reasonable, but
Mhm.
I would be fine with a significant number of Palestinians being able to return, and hopefully we reciprocated, and there would be Jews allowed to live in Palestine, and we could work out some kind of arrangement that would be amicable to both sides. I think that would be. Let's say that was on the offering. Would you convince the
Yeah.
Hamas leader, listen, that's probably the best you can get, and it's not so bad. Most of the Palestinians who would want to
No, I
return to
wouldn't say.
Israel,
I wouldn't even say that's the best you can get. I'd say that's a win-win for everybody.
yeah,
If under those scenario, which we both agree is hard, very hard to get, but I wouldn't even say let's settle for that. I'd say that that's something we can build on.
Right.
But if you say the state of Israel as it's understood today, I would say no. I'm against that. I'm against the state of
Right.
Israel as it exists.
But I think we can improve the situation of the state of Israel, and I think within the Green Line, the state of Israel is not so bad, really. You know, there
Yeah,
are
if you exclude the refugees, right?
if you
So
exclude the refugees,
yeah,
correct?
that's a big if.
Sure, but
But I would
we're
agree
talking
with
about
you.
people who
But
haven't necessarily.
that's why I said it was a win-win. I mean,
Yeah,
if it weren't for the refugees, then yes, Palestinians, if they had perfect equal rights and just dealt with civil rights issues, then that's I'm all for that. Let's fight that battle versus the battle today, which is existential for the Palestinians. They're rotting in refugee camps. So yeah, if you
mhm.
can reduce the problem to a civil rights problem, I think that's a huge step forward, and I'd be willing to take
Sure.
that step.
So that I think that's the conversation. If I was the Hamas member, that you should be convincing them also.
Sure.
Listen, and I my side is not great too. I would be yelling at Bibi or yelling at his replacement that you know this is the direction you need to go. You need to make a reasonable deal and treat these people as equals here in this land and find an amicable deal so we can all live together in some way. And I understand that both sides want some level of autonomy and they want self-determination. They both sides really want like basically a state, but they feel attached emotionally and culturally and economically to the whole side. Find a way to make that work. And I would tell them that's what you should pursue.
Yeah, I just right now the only thing on my mind is I want to get there where we have this conversation, but we just got to stop the killing. Right now, there's just so
Yeah.
many people dying, and I don't know
Yeah.
how to do it.
So I'm hopeful that they'll reach an agreement. There are talks going on right now, and I'm hopeful that they'll agree to stop the violence and both sides. And even if they can only do it for 6 weeks, then maybe there'll be an opportunity to talk to people and convince them to extend that and to give peace a chance. You know, once the violence stops and people see their relatives again, and there's a way to end it, they can move forward.
Yeah. What is so put your over under. What how many more days till the ceasefire?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I I'm hopeful. I give it a 50-50 chance that there's going to get to a ceasefire.
By the end of the month?
Yeah, within the next short period of time, couple of weeks maybe. And it might fall through. I don't know. I don't know. I'm hopeful though that they'll.
So what is Israeli day-to-day life like now? I mean, for the Palestinians all around the diaspora, we're traumatized. Every day, you don't even want to turn on the computer to see another atrocity. How prevalent is what's going on in Gaza in Israeli life?
I mean, well, like the traumas for us are the soldiers that die. Like we know people who know somebody whose brothers died or their cousin died or something. People,
So are
people that
people going out to dinner like Tel Aviv like they normally do, or it's somewhere
a
subdued?
little bit more. Yeah, life is getting back to normal in Israel proper. I mean, a lot of people are in the army, and I see people I know people that are, in Gaza right now that are, and it's pretty sad, and so a lot of people are in the army and people started getting out and there's an uncertainty. They don't know if we'll go into a bigger war, we'll go into a war in Lebanon, what might happen,
Mhm.
there's definitely fear that we're not out of this. People are not like happy. There's not a celebratory mood, that's for sure.
Do you think Bibi would start a war with Hezbollah?
I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say it's Bibi starting the war. I don't think that Israel would unilaterally start the war if it wasn't being pushed from the other side. I mean, things could spiral out of control. That's always a possibility. People keep shooting more and more rockets. It goes up for a day and then it comes back down. You know,
Mhm.
I got an app in my phone that shows you how many rockets where the things are shoot because there's a warning system, right? I
Mhm.
can tell you,
So he's from both directions, from Gaza and from
and
Lebanon.
from the north. So if it's in the north, it's from Hezbollah.
Yeah.
So lately there's not so much going on in Gaza, so I don't hear a lot of planes here. There's, not usually rockets from Gaza much anymore. It's mostly in the north, and some days it's picking up, some days it's calming back down. It's possible. There's a fear that it could blow out of control, but I don't know. I think that
And
the other side doesn't really want to do it. They're just sort of trying to put
Mhm.
pressure on the negotiations. That's my feeling. There was a lull when the talks seemed to be going better, and then both the leaders hardened the positions, and then more rockets happened. I mean, this is negotiating with shooting missiles at the same time. That's a reality
So
we're living in.
what do you think of the ICJ?
Um, it doesn't bother me that Israel got taken to, I think hopefully it sort of scared some people in the leadership straight. Like, you got to watch what you say and what you're thinking. You can't just like call for removing people. It's not cool. There's a rest of the world. You don't live in an echo chamber and of your little group of right-wing fantasy friends. There's a real world out there. So hopefully that'll get them to straighten out and not do things that are too bad. So I don't it doesn't bother me that the rest of the Western world is putting pressure on Israel not to let this get out of control. I think somebody should be doing it, to
Mhm.
keeping things civil. And they're working, the diplomats from the UK, the European Union, the Americans are working day and night to try to, end this standoff, and hopefully they'll be successful. I'm hoping that they'll do a good job. 'Cause,
All right.
mhm.
So I've run out of steam here. So
Yeah, fair enough.
how do you feel about this conversation? You think it got
I,
us anywhere?
I think it was good.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Have you learned something in this
Yeah,
conversation,
I learned a
or is
little
it
bit about
just?
what I probed how I think about
Mhm.
boundaries about right. It's important.
Mhm.
Now, hopefully, did you feel you learned something?
I'm learning. I'm still learning because I don't judge any particular group. Um, I just think we're all humans, and in a certain situation, all humans would react the same in a group. And so I'm just trying to get my head around what my feed tells me is a genocide, and
Mm-hmm.
how that can happen, and how an entire country can support a genocide. So I'm still dealing with it. I think a lot of people are trying to
Sure.
understand how it's possible that so many atrocities could happen, so many traumatizing things mass murder could happen. And I think from your perspective, you don't see it as a policy. Let me give you an example. Um, the difference between like a rogue wave, let's say it's 20 feet high, versus a 10-foot high or 5-foot high tidal wave, is a rogue wave will wash through. It may kill 2 or 3 people, and that'll be the end of it. But a tidal wave can wipe out hundreds of thousands of people, as we saw in Indonesia and
Mm.
Japan. So it seems that you see these atrocities as rogue waves that kill a few people here and there, 20 people, 30 people. Whereas from what I see, it's a tidal wave, is that this is the Israeli population seems to be okay in celebrating death. And I agree with what we were saying before, is that this is the feed that I'm getting. But that's the
Yeah,
difference in our perception
for
between the
sure.
perception
Yeah,
of most people in Israel, is that these things happen, but they're little rogue waves, versus
yeah.
what I perceive it, which is this is how Israelis are.
Yeah, so I would say that's not the case. That Israelis don't are not celebrating death. We don't view ourselves as celebrating death. We are afraid of the other side. We think the other side is genocidal, and we're justifiably defending ourselves. And the poor Palestinians that get killed are victims of circumstances and unfortunate actions, and we point the finger at Hamas. That's what they're trying to be. They have this self-perception that we're the moral side, so we don't want to acknowledge that we're doing anything wrong. Similar probably to,
I think that the difference between my position and your position is the question of how serious of a threat is Hamas, right? If Hamas were a threat of they're going to kill 800 people, then killing so many people would seem, it's overkill, right? But if there
Yeah.
were an existential threat, then yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I think that's the
So
difference between
Israelis don't know. They believe Hamas to be an existential threat in the long run
Mhm.
and an unknown
Yeah.
to an unknown scope, and it's not clear what it is.
Yeah.
But right, there's
Yeah, I
definitely a
think that's
fear
just
that Hamas wants to commit genocide, and they will do it if they have the opportunity, and that
and
they're
can do
just
it. Yeah, and they.
and we don't know, and so we figured let's wipe them out before they ever grow big enough to do it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well,
Okay.
let's call it quits for now, and maybe we continue this later if we can get 10 views. We can get 10 views
Yeah.
on this. We'll do it
I
again.
think we get a lot more than 10 views.
All right.
All right. Have a good
Okay,
evening.
Rafi. All right. You too.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.